One of the key predictors of success is conscientiousness, which includes consistency. Steve Sandor and I explore how to maintain consistency, how to find energy, how to stay focused on your goals, how to keep an upbeat and vibrant way in doing things so that you enjoy your life while also achieving great success.
Welcome to Share.care, an all-inclusive community sharing experience, strength, and hope to create strong, healthy, and inspiring relationships. Share.care communities work toward every individual feeling safe, valued, and heard, free from the threat of danger, pain, or harm. Each episode, founder Damian Andrews explores the principles underpinning Share.care and invites expert special guests to share their knowledge so you can easily reap the benefits so many others experience. You hold the choice to create your future. Let it be with strong, healthy, and inspiring relationships.
Good morning, Steve. How are you going?
Good, mate. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. You getting all set for Christmas?
I started about a week ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just
Last minute rush?
well, just there's very little need to do anything before Christmas because the last thing, I mean, maybe people, might be keen to talk to someone before Christmas, but I can't imagine why about something that, other than what they're trying to do is get stuff done before the end of the year and all the rest of it. So I just decided that rather than trying to force it, I'll just go and do some backyard gardening sort of stuff in the business, get the weeds out and clean up stuff. So
Yeah, I think that's the last thing people want around this time of the year is advice to the business. They're just trying to get through and
they're just trying to get stuff done.
yeah, exactly. There's managers are busy trying to get their employees done. Employees are trying to get ready and relax for Christmas.
Exactly. And you?
Yeah, similar sort of thing. It's been there's been a last minute rush to get things done on the work side of things.
Right.
There's been a number of there's a couple of urgent projects that are going to be finished early in the year, so they're struggling to keep that pace up so that it does actually get finished. These are critical infrastructure projects, and so it's kind of keeps me a bit busy. But getting ready for Christmas, it's spread out this year, which is good. It's a whole different dynamic for me, and I've for the viewers, or listeners, apologise for repeating myself, but from my perspective, normally Christmas is this massive thing where I like to have lots of presents under the tree, and for the boy, I would buy lots of presents for him, and it turned out that they were present really for me because he didn't really want them. It was just for me to have something under the tree. And I was
gratification.
Yeah, so I was kind of looking at it going, well, he's not using all this stuff, and should I get that? And he only wanted a couple of things this year. He wanted some AirPods because he'd lost his AirPods and he's been using cable ones ever since. And he wanted a video game and its updates or its extensions, and that was on special for 24 hours. It was like half price, so that I'll buy all that. So he got all that. So there's not really much to put under the tree. And then I was talking with someone else, and we were talking about that, and it was like, well, okay, let's something different. And it came up about writing a letter. I thought, oh, that's a great idea. So instead of me putting presents under the Christmas tree, I'm actually writing letters, old school letters to people, and just saying, appreciate you being in my life, and doing that as a Christmas gift. Which has been a lot of fun writing that out.
And these are people who are relatives or friends or
friends, relatives.
Right. Nice.
Writing, for morning, there'll be a couple of letters under the tree for family. But other people, I've sent some letters around the world, in old school post.
Yeah.
Although it's an express post to try and get there before Christmas, but we'll see if it makes it or not. I thought that was a really cool thing. And then I've got a few other things where I've kind of, just give a couple of things away to people that need it as well. So just that approach.
Yeah, nice. Do you think there's a shift to old school stuff, do you think? I know our generation, because we know what old school is, but I wonder I wonder if I wonder if this whether there's actually a push away from the I don't think it's that callousness, but the lack of depth of electronic communication.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting point that you mentioned because they do talk about the with the electronic communication. I mean, today we're more connected than any time in history. Yet people feel more alone than any time in history. And to me, I'm kind of like a little bit confused by that. How can we not be connected? And from my perspective too, I like my space as well. So when I'm alone, I don't feel alone. I enjoy that. I used to have someone mow the lawns for me. We used to have a pool person and lawnmower and cleaner and all that sort of stuff. But I ditched the lawnmower, partly because the one that I had, it was really good. He moved on, did something else, and then I struggled to find someone's good. And then I thought, gonna ditch that, and I'm gonna do it myself. But I didn't want to do it because I'm lazy. When I say I'm lazy, I don't like doing things the hard way if they can be done easily. So I went and bought a self-propelled electric lawnmower and battery-operated thing, and it turned out to be actually much better than any of the gas-powered ones I've had. And it's easy; you just push the button and it drives forward. And so I really enjoy that time now out there. Just maybe there's cathartic about something about that. Just going backwards and forwards or round and round, the Forrest Gump type thing. Because I've got quite a big lawn. And it should be a ride-on scenario because it's nearly an acre, and it's but I just enjoy that going backwards and forwards with the lawnmower. I don't have to work too hard because I said I'm a bit lazy, but it just drives itself, and I enjoy that space. So I don't feel alone, but I do wonder, like you say, about this technology. I wonder how that's possible. How we can be feeling more disconnected. Is it because we're too busy looking at what other people have put up and thinking about that as opposed to looking at our own life and being grateful for what we have?
Yeah, I think we might confuse the word connected on social media as actually being connected.
That's a good point.
I think it's a link, so but I don't know about you, but I keep getting requests to join, to connect with people
Yeah, on
on Facebook.
Subscribe to this.
Right. And when I came back from PNG, I had 87 connections on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
But they were connections.
Yeah.
Right? And I'd been on since 2008.
Yeah.
I joined it to find a job. That's what it was initially.
Yeah.
When I came back, I still had 87 connections.
Mm.
And now I've got something like 1,900. Right. And a lot of those I actually, in the first 12 months, I was actually trying to reach out to people to build relationships with people, not sell them anything because I didn't have anything to sell.
Yeah.
But now it's very much people reaching out to me going, looked at your profile and love what you're doing and, would love to, be connected with you. And I look at their profile and I go, okay, you're trying to sell me something, but I'm going to game the system now, right? So if I'm connected to you, right, then I'm connected to all of your first connections through a second connection, right? So I've jumped to the dark side.
But you mentioned about game the system, and that it seemed maybe that's part of the reason why people are feeling that disconnection is because
absolutely. It's like, stop it. Like if you want, if you want to sell me something, tell me you want to sell me something. I'd much prefer that, right? Than you trying to come in with this, what do they call it, hook and bait?
Yeah.
Bait and hook or whatever it is. It's like, no, just tell me the truth, and I'll tell you whether I'm happy to be involved or not. involved. But I think there's a lot of, and the marketing people would howl us down with, this, because you can't operate like that, can you?
Yeah.
I don't know. That it's like this. It'll be an interesting exercise or experiment, to go to people and just go, I'm trying to sell you something.
Well, from my perspective, that's what I do. It's like, I have calls where I will call. It's interesting, actually. A number of the calls were just genuine um, calls to say hello or connect, which I've done deliberately, and I've made that they're potential clients or are clients or have been clients, and I've made the conscious thing that I'm just calling to say, generally it's a New Year's or there is Christmas calls. But I've genuinely called, and actually New Year's is a good one, because I generally call to say Happy New Year, and I make a point of I'm not selling anything. I just want to see how your family is and things like that, and that's how you can also tell is someone really connected, because they know things about you. And if they just and I've called up and gone, Happy New Year. How's it? How are the two kids? Did you have what did you get up to? I just wanted to connect. It was partly, if I'm going to be completely honest, it's partly a marketing call, because
Sure.
it's just letting myself know. But but I don't call to sell anything. But the amount of times where in response to that, they've come back and said, actually, I've got something for you to do. And it's like, I didn't ask for it.
Yeah.
And I get more, I've had more business and that way than actually calling up to sell people stuff. Selling people stuff, when I actually call and say, look, I'm calling about, I've got this opportunity or this thing that I'm doing, and I just wanted to ask about it. And I'm upfront about that straight away, because I don't want to waste people's time. And that's how I'd prefer to be treated. If someone's got something to sell me, it's like, cool, tell me about it. If it's useful for me, I'll look at it, and I appreciate you sharing that with me. And that's sown the seed for later when they actually did need it, because I'm calling because I don't know if they need it or not. But I'm telling you that I've got it. And then at a later point, it'll come back because we've stayed in contact and going, actually, that thing you mentioned a while ago, that's come in helpful. And I've had that actually just recently, I thought, with a product that we're developing with one of my clients. I'd put it out there, and it's a long-term development product. And I'd been busy in the background doing things. And a couple of people that I'd reached out to, they contacted me. It was 4 months later. So it's because of approvals and things like that. It's about 18 months to 2 years to get this through. But they called me and said, "Hey, are you still developing that? We're interested in this product." And I'm like, "Cool. This is the best way to do sales: is have people chase you."
Yeah, demand. That's the whole demand gen, right?
Yeah.
So demand generating. You put your message out there. You make it valuable. And interesting, and make it available for people when they're ready to be available. And that's okay if you've got time to be able to do that. If you don't have time, then you have to force the envelope.
Yeah.
And look for opportunities. But it's like marketing is probably the hardest part of business, I reckon.
I think that's the consistency side of things, and that's part of what we were here to talk about, is that consistency. Because another example of that was it wasn't force the issue, but it was to give that extra motivation. I talked about one of my products, which is the exceptional effort program that I run, which is that involves continuous improvement, time management, that kind of thing. And with one of my clients, I was talking about it because I was doing some other work for them, and with one department, I'd mentioned it, and this is a long-term client and big organization, and I'd mentioned it a few times, and they weren't interested. And it's like, the managers, we do our. He's coming. We'll do a lessons learned at the end of the project, and it's like, that never gets implemented. They've actually engaged a major firm. Or EY, they've engaged Ernest Young to do they did a review, and the review started I won't say which year this was, but the review started in February. We get to, I think, October. I think it was Octoberish, so 4 months. February, no, April. So it started April, October. Yeah, so 6 months later, still haven't got the report. I think the report came in November, and then you've got to implement it. So you know how habits work. I mean, it's never these reports go on a shelf eventually. You get the report, someone reads it, nothing happens, and so that hadn't happened. I was then working with a different department within that organisation, and I mentioned it to the senior manager of that, or the manager of that department, and he goes, "Yeah, that sounds really great. Next year, this is 2023." He said, "Next year, after middle of next year, let's have a chat about it." And I'm thinking, yeah, this is, it's like, okay. And
The
I
whole
thought,
landscape's changed in 12 months.
yeah, I'm like going, oh, it's so you'll want to, and I'm thinking, I don't want to wait until, you've obviously got some interest. So what I did is I put together, I have a little, well, I call it teaser packet, and I actually write on it, this is not a proposal, it's a teaser.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, here's the problem, because you always solve the problem. And I said, you get get a consultant in. End result is report on shelf, no one looks at. I wrote that. This is the most and consult costs a lot of money. I could have covered it. It costs a lot of money, takes a lot of time. The people that are reviewing it, that are giving you this, don't know the internal systems. And
it's usually a template that they've got.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't think about that one. I should have had that one in. But
the cookie cutter.
Exactly. That they've just changed a few words and put your logo on it.
Yeah. You can always tell that because in the footer it's the other company's name.
I know.
One thing I forgot to do that. Oops.
Yeah, attention to detail. Yeah, exactly. So I put that there and said, likely outcome on shelf, collecting dust was what I wrote. And then I said, okay, continuous lessons learned at the end of the project. You've got a day of employees sitting there giving lots and lots of information. It's too much information to absorb. And then there's a third point. I always just leave it at 3. And then I said, likely outcome, a day of work lost and nothing implemented. And then I got into, I did that. So that was one page. The second page was a little bit about habits, how, habits don't change instantly. You've got to do that, as we're talking about, consistency. You've got to consistently implement the strategy you want. So it becomes it happens personally. It happens in organizations because, believe it or not, there's people working in organizations. Actually, you take the people out of organizations, you don't have an organization.
Yeah.
So you've got to deal with people and how their habits work. And the other one that I put, the key point was, unconscious behavior, because I have the military background, we do drill. The reason we do drill is to put it into your unconscious so that you do it as a habit. And then I put a little tease. So I had there was a third point. I can't remember what the third point was. Anyway, and then I just outlined. I said, okay, this is the program, and I just had a dot point. We start with this, and most people could take that and follow that if they had really thought about it. What happened was, then I printed that out. Nice color printer. So it had my thing on my cover page, 3 pages of information, had teaser on the cover page, and then a back page. And I printed it out and put it on his desk, and I emailed him a copy as well. He came up to me, I think 2 days later, when I was in the office again. He goes, "Have you got time to have a chat?" And it's like, so we had, and I said, "Look, I've got to go to a couple of meetings, but maybe we can book in an appointment." So I pushed him out. I pushed him away. I said, and then I went to the meetings and said, I'll go back and see if he's still there. And he was still there. So I knocked on his door and said, "Yeah, I'm back to chat if you've got time." He goes, "No, come in, sit down, sit." And he went through, and wanted to go through all these key points. And he goes, "That's so true. We got to do that. We're going to start that first thing next year." And it's like, bang, sold.
Yep. And it's funny, isn't it? It's the difference between commitment and habit, and consistency. And then because obviously I knew we were going to be talking about this, so I've been thinking about what's the difference between all of those, and why is it so hard, to be so consistent all the time?
Yeah.
And I think maybe we're not wired, and I'm not a psychologist, and so I'm a bush lawyer, but can I be a bush psychologist at the same time? I don't know.
Hey, I'm a bush psychologist as well. We can do that.
Yeah, I'm not a philosopher, but I'd love to be. I'm I love philosophical thoughts. So yeah, it's habits. I think become sort of this unconscious behavior where you just like I was going to the gym
Mm,
because I still need to lose weight.
yeah.
And it was the gym was the first time I went, I nearly died. Literally, my legs
I remember
were
those experiences.
it's just hard as all hell.
Yeah.
But I felt so good afterwards, because I'd actually made that conscious effort
Yeah.
to do something. And this particular gym, they sell you monthly programs,
Mm,
but it wasn't just the thought of losing weight.
mm,
It because it was like if it was just the thought of losing weight, well, I'd starve myself,
yeah.
right? So that I can do it. There's a number of ways that I can do it. So this was more about, okay, it's losing weight and physical fitness and health, and there's a whole bunch of really good people there. They made me feel welcome,
Yeah.
and so each time I went back, I felt I had that other piece of endorphin, that laughter, joy, people calling me, good to see you again, Steve, all of those
Yeah.
elements um, contributed to me wanting to go on a consistent basis. So then I would lock it into my diary. I
Yeah.
don't do it in the morning. I do it in the afternoon. It feels
Mm,
just that my cadence, right?
yeah.
If it wasn't for all of those aspects, if it was just me, going for a walk every afternoon at 4:30,
Yeah.
it's the same sort of effect, but it just didn't have the same resonance for me. So I just wonder whether there's you need to find your own. You need to find your own. I'm going to say passion, but there needs to be a purpose behind it. But maybe to be consistent. There has to be what? I mean, I'm consistently inconsistent.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about this. I'm doing some work with. Her name's Linda Gayo. She's a human design consultant,
Yeah.
and I'm just starting to get into human design. It's fascinating
Mm,
theory, but in that, if you go by human design, I've got my energy levels come and go, right?
yeah.
So there are some times when I have lots of energy and I can focus on certain things, and there are other times where I don't have the energy to do it. And if
Mm,
I focused on those things, then all I'd be doing is wasting a lot of energy doing something that I don't have a lot of energy for. Right?
yeah.
So I'd actually not achieve anything. And that's how that's having been looked at this for the last couple of months, that's how I actually work. So I now get to a point where I'm consistent when the energy is there for me.
Mm,
I actually, I then put everything else aside and work on whatever feels right for me at that point in time. But there are some things that I just can't do that for, right? So because I'm is constraining, or the people around me, like the gym, right? I can't just go, well, I don't feel like going today, right?
yeah.
I have to be consistent. So I don't think it's an easy answer. And I keep saying, we just keep beating ourselves up about all of these things. But so just be a little, I think find what works for you, and
Yeah.
don't use it as an excuse not to do it, right? So this is
Yeah.
not procrastination, but this
Mm,
is actually just finding some way of building consistency into your day.
yeah.
Um, I don't know. I don't know.
How does it work, like, from your perspective? You mentioned about the energy. When you have the energy, that
mm,
you use, you maintain that consistency. Because I was thinking about that too. Like, I remember as a kid, you finish the end of the day of work. Well, I wouldn't say kid, you know, early 20s.
that's a kid.
Yeah,
That's a kid.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Um, I just wanted to clarify that because
Yeah.
people go, because I'm 50. And people
10.
go, you don't look 50. And it's like, well, yeah, I don't, there's a number of things I don't do that I did before that, helped me,
Yeah.
but I think, I remember, getting, I specifically remember when I was at younger age, you'd be tired from work. You'd be working all day. You'd be tired. You get there, and you're just like, oh, I just want to chill out. And then you get a phone call from a friend and says, oh, we're doing this, and all of a sudden you've got that energy. I'm just wondering from your, and you're out and you're partying all night, and it's like, so, but you were knackered before. So how is it that I'm just wondering from your perspective that energy, what happens for you when you're feeling that energy, and how is that impacting? Do you think?
Yeah, it's I'm only well, I was unconsciously aware of it, right? And now
Mm,
I'm consciously aware of it.
yeah,
So now I'm actually just listening to my gut, and
yeah.
I'm waiting um, for signals to
Mm.
tell me that this is the right thing to do. So it's not that I'm sitting here, in a Zen
I love it
Zen
when people talk
position,
about meditation. It's like,
waiting for the universe to deliver.
yeah,
It's sort of like that, but so I'm still doing a lot of, I've still got my plans. I've still got
mm,
things that I need to do, client work, preparation for, master classes and all the
mm,
things that, I've got planned in 2023. But then when I get inspired, I guess it's that I start working on something
yeah,
and feels, it feels effortless.
yeah,
It's at that point where I go, oh, I'm on a roll here, right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
and then I zone in on that, and
mm,
that's when I'll have a look at my diary and I'll go, right, I always leave buffer time in my diary anyway.
yeah,
20% of my day is made up of nothing, so that it can be filled with stuff.
yeah.
And so over promise, under deliver, or under deliver and
Yeah, exactly.
And the real way is that you under promise and over deliver. If you're
Yeah,
wondering, um, yeah. So it's new for me, right?
yeah,
It's a whole new world in terms of the way that I'm operating. But I'm feeling a lot of as I said, when I get into that space, it's just feels right. So
yeah. The
I,
zone.
you know, obviously I can't do it if I've got something pressing, like if I couldn't just say, sorry, Damien, can't do this because I feel
I'm in the zone. Yeah.
I'm in the zone, right? So there's some practicalities to all of this, but yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, that's funny. I love that, and that reminds me of it. There was a scene from was it Big Bang Theory with the Sheldon character. He's like, "Can't do that. I'm in the zone. Can't. I'm in the zone," and it's like fobbing everyone off and going, "No, I'm in the zone." um, and and I suppose there are people with that personality quirk as well, and
So
that
how do you drop consistency into, like, you've come from a military background, or
yeah,
you had some military background. Obviously, family has a huge influence on how things are done in your life,
mm.
and then you are then interacting with different people, mentors, etc. So how does consistency show up for you?
I think I mean, for me, when I look back at it, it was. I mean, I was very clear about what it is that I wanted to do now, and and that wasn't long term plans. Generally, it was short term plans. I mean, and I've done a lot of things because of that. Like in when I was in the army, um, you know, and I had a lot of discipline imposed on me when I was a child as well. To put that into context, when I got to the army, I could already fold my bed army style, like 45-degree sheets, everything, because that's how I had to make my bed at home. My mum made me make my bed that way at home. Where my clothes were stored, the socks had to be folded a certain way, stacked a certain way. They went in this compartment. Then underwear was folded a certain way, went the other way, and everything was like it was so regimented. So in a way, I had that ability to discipline myself because that was something that I had from young. I didn't do that. I rebelled against that and went completely the other way. As a teenager, um, and something to do with my parents splitting up probably helped. There wasn't that consistency in behavior. So, and
Mm.
to put that in another context as well, um, consistently in my primary school, and probably, it probably was just primary school, because my parents split up when we entered secondary school. I think that's where it stopped. But certainly in primary school, I would get home from school, and my sister and I had a sister who was a year younger, and would get home from school, and my mum would have another hour to an hour and a half of homework for us to do. So we were consistently doing an extra hour, hour and a half of homework, which was fantastic for my results at school. I did exceptionally well. I think right up to year 9. And what happened was is you see, when my parents split up, that changes the whole dynamic. So the consistency in my family um, dynamic had changed dramatically. Well, that hour and an hour and a half of homework stopped. Also, to becoming a teenager, you become a little bit more rebellious,
Mm.
and don't do that. Well, that I don't think that's put down to a teenager, because I've got a 14-year-old son who doesn't do the rebellious thing, and does the key things he needs to. But I've approached that differently. So I what the result of that was, I stopped studying. Doing Not only did I stop studying at home, I stopped studying at school too. There's times where I go to school and just didn't do anything. I just sat in a class and did nothing. So eventually, and because I didn't have to, I was so far ahead. Um, I didn't have to do that consistent behavior anymore, and as a result, eventually the study caught up with me, and then went past to where I was, and my grades went down quite dramatically. So how do I apply it now? I mean, and this is what I'm writing about in the book that I'm writing at the moment, Be the Black Hole, Become a Force So Powerful Your Goals Are Attracted to You. I link it to when I look at me being consistent, and I come back to that energy point as well. Um, your identity and your beliefs. And I say your beliefs are your internal elastic band. They keep you where you believe you should be. And I think that applies just generally. And I know from times where because I don't believe procrastination exists.
Mm.
I think in any given moment, whatever you're doing is what you choose to do. And
Mm.
I know, and I've, when there's times when I've been binge watching something on Netflix, and I'm like thinking about that, going, I should be doing this. And I go, well, hang on a minute. I'm watching this because I'm choosing, that's more important in my mind. And as soon as I switch and go, actually, that bit of that report that I wanted to finish, and should be working on, is actually, that's my focus. All of a sudden, it feels uncomfortable to be binge watching.
Right.
And also too, like, I might be tired, and it's like, actually, this is really important to me. And all of a sudden, I start doing it, and the energy comes.
Mm.
And so that's how I've created it. It's really becomes, and it's effortless. I've found it's an energy shift. Well, energy is not the right word. It's a mental shift. Probably is an energy shift, but I just shift and be really consistent about who it is I see myself as. And I see myself as having finished this report or finished this, and I don't get into the why. I'm not a why person. I struggle with that, and I wrote a number of articles on why. People go, you could have why to give you motivation, and that's what I talked about. I did so many different things when I was in the army. Because of the shifts we worked long shifts. We actually worked a 7-day fortnight. The way the rotation works, so I had a lot of free time. And because as when you're young, or younger, it's like, well, the day off, you can work hard, you have a sleep, you get up, and off you go. And and I wanted to learn marketing, so I went, okay, and I went and applied to the marketing firms all around I was in Perth at the time, and I went to the marketing firms there and said, oh, I want to learn about marketing, and just why not?
Yeah.
So I wrote a letter and said, I want to learn about I can't remember what was in the letter, but it was something about an application. Want to do learning? Can I come on board and and do that? And the smaller marketing firm said, yeah, why not? So I come and I directed commercials. I wrote copy for obviously I was guided in that.
Yeah.
I got that experience. And that's where it was going like, well, consistently, I did all this different stuff. I did I want to work in marketing long term? I thought I did, but after doing it for a while, I was like, yeah, no, that's not really my
Not
thing.
really me. Yeah.
So I consistently did a lot of different things. That was but it was what I focused on at the time. That's what I was coming back to. It was that mental focus, and that gave me the energy and the ability to, in that time, keep doing it.
A couple of things I wanted to, because do you think pressure, or the time pressure, so the Eisenhower, for the, important and urgency,
Yeah,
right, Eisenhower model. So not important but urgent.
yeah. I know what you mean. Yeah, you got the quadrant. Yeah,
Yeah. So it's important but not urgent. So it's strategic. It's important and urgent. So it's tactical. You actually have to do it.
yeah,
So that example that you gave of the Netflix and the report,
yeah.
was it? So there was guilt there, right? I should be doing this thing. Realization that it's probably I get paid.
Yeah.
If I could get paid to watch Netflix, I probably would. Um, so was the pressure? Did you need the pressure to give you that sort of push forward, or do you do you consistently wait for that moment that is, the need to act, because there is no, you're in a corner now. You've got nowhere else to go. You've actually got
Yeah,
to.
no, it wasn't a situation like that because I'm
Right,
not a last minute person. I
right,
don't like leaving things to last minute. I don't think you perform well in that. So this report wasn't due for a few weeks.
right.
So there wasn't a urgent, but and urgent and necessary. I can't remember the quadrants either.
Yeah,
It was so long ago that did that. So it wasn't urgent, but I was thinking about it from the perspective of and maybe and it could have been we need balance in our life too. So we do as a
yeah,
consistency. We need to have that balance, and maybe I just needed that little chill space, and I think it's maybe a guy thing too. Where that's why they say guys like fishing. It's like you can fish, and you don't even need bait because it's not about fishing. It's just about having headspace.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
and maybe I just needed that little bit of headspace, and then I had a trigger to go, hang on a minute. Internally, I've had my space
Yep,
now, and that's when my brain has started to think, okay, I'm relaxed now. I
yep.
need to do this,
Yeah, at the time. The reason I bring it up is because actually I feel as though, if I don't have that pressure there,
yeah,
I'm not my best, which
right,
is really interesting, right? So it's not. So I do it. It's not that I'm not thinking about the pro, I'm not doing anything, but I'm actually doing a lot of thinking. So I might, in my head as I'm walking from one place to the other, like
yeah,
the preparation for this, right?
yeah,
Is I was thinking about it a lot,
mm,
but it wasn't until half an hour before we actually started this that I actually went on and did some actual research about consistency, and and then I was like, okay, I've got it now, right? I can move forward. So I just wonder whether we're all made up of different ways of doing things. It's interesting that you talked about, when you're under that pressure that you actually or you tend to make mistakes. That's why I tend to go over things
yeah,
more than once.
yeah, correct.
It's like the absolute. I'll probably spend. They say 95% is about right.
Yes,
99%. And I know that I over engineer things. I know that I spend far too much time editing and looking at. But it's important to me where the full stop is and the comma is. Because I'm not. English is not a great. One of my best assets, right? And math is far better. I'm far better at math than I am at English. But so I need to spend a little more time on making sure that it's actually correct.
yeah.
Grammarly and all of those AI things now. Brilliant, right? I mean, if they could only find an app for the whiteboard marker, I'd be fine. on the butcher's paper, right?
Yeah,
Yeah. So yeah, it's interesting that I think different people have different That's what I keep saying. I think we beat ourselves up because we compare ourselves with people. We compare it. Like I could have then said, "Oh, gee, I should be like that." It's like, no, that's just the way you are, and you'd be uncomfortable getting to a point where it was like the last minute, and you just know from historically that you make mistakes. Whereas with me, it's like I get bored with it far too early, and I don't feel as though I'm as creative
Yeah.
as in those moments. I'm far more creative. I know this.
Yeah.
When I get to that pressure point, and then I go right, and then this thing just pops into my head,
Yeah.
and I go, wow, that's pretty good, right? We'll run
Yeah.
with. Just interesting. I love that. What was the name of your book? I love that. The black
Be the
hole.
black hole.
Yeah.
Be the black hole. Become a force so powerful your goals are attracted to you. Because I've actually found, from my perspective, and I did this and I still don't know how it works, but my friends hate me for it. I heard about it somewhere about setting goals and just
The
being.
law of attraction.
Yeah, part of the law of attraction, but it's more about just being. And there was because I did a lot of work on Steve Jobs, and I wrote some things about that. And there was a part about leadership. Wasn't just Steve Jobs, but there was an leadership program study that I did, which was very unique. It was quite boutique and like one of those hidden gurus.
Right.
And he talked about.
An Australian or an American?
No, he was an Australian guy.
Right.
Although he's
Wasn't Maury Rayner by any chance, was it?
no, it was a guy called Marvin Oka.
Right.
And he talked about leadership. One of the key things he talked about was that the person is just being. They're not, they have a power of purpose. So and it's that purpose. When you look at and he used some of the, this is going back to the 80s. He used IBM, the Tom Watson from IBM, the guy that started FedEx. They had this power of purpose that naturally they led by who they were. So that and it was about so the leadership wasn't a thing that they and it's not a thing. Leadership, it's like the example that he used, and you've done neurolinguistics and know how this works as well. And people say I have a bad relationship. Well, it's like, where did you get it? You go to Safeway and pick it up off the shelf. We use language the wrong way. Because you don't have a bad relationship, you're relating to someone in a way that's not productive. And when you think about it, that's usually what happens. You get, someone says something, you get a little bit offended by that, and then you say something which then escalates it, and then all of a sudden you're having this argument and you're sleeping in separate beds.
Yeah.
Whereas and it's not because you have a bad relationship; it's because you're relating your actions, what you're doing. It's a verb.
You're relating badly.
You're relating in a way that's not productive. Yeah. And so when you step back and go, well, and this is, and step back and do a different behavior, that changes that whole dynamic. And leadership was the same thing, where it's becomes, it's not something you have, it's something you do, you lead. Well, how do you lead? And one of my favorite, and I've got all these little snippets that I've cut out of movies and TV shows. One of my favorite is from Saving Private Ryan. And they're walking along in the field, and I think it's one of the characters says to the Tom Hanks character, said, "Well, what is Major, you don't complain at all?" And he goes, "No, well, there's a chain of command with complaints. Complaints go up, they don't go down." And they'll say, "Well, what if I was, oh yeah, he mustn't have been a major. So what if I was a major and you were a sergeant? What would you say then?" And he goes, "Well, I would say this was an excellent mission, sir, with a very valuable objective, sir," and goes on and it's like he just doesn't get suckered into that. He just goes and holds that position and the point that I liked about that was I've used that to recognize where you are in the hierarchy of your organization. If you're complaining a lot, you're obviously not at the top. And if you're complaining too, because when you're at the top, you can't, as a leader, you can't complain. But where I was going, sorry, I went to a slight distraction with that.
Rabbit holes are good.
Yeah, with the Be the Black Hole. I can't remember where I got it from. It was something to do with that, along those lines and in that area where I picked up this thing. It was like, you the law of attraction, when you have it really clear in your mind, things fall into place.
Mm.
Um, and I think it might have been from a Wayne Dyer thing that one of my favorite audios is Wayne Dyer's How to Be, or it's a book, but I've never read the book. I've only listened to the audio. How to Be a No Limit Person. Might have been from there, something that's said in that. I listened to that over and over again. Anyway, I made this conscious choice that wherever I went, more often than not, I would get a parking spot right out front.
Parking ferry.
Yeah.
Parking ferry. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Yeah. And my friends hate it because pretty much not only do I get a parking spot, a lot of the times there's still money in the meter. You know? But it's like where I live down here in the peninsula in Victoria, the town that I'm in is it's a boutique little town. There's a little shopping center. Well, it's a massive suburb, but the old town there's a boutique little shopping center, and they've actually removed half of the car parks and put seating there and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And but I still get a park almost always right out front, or very close to it. And so that's where what Be the Black Hole is about, is setting things up so that not only part of it too is part of the reason I get the car parks is because I'm looking for those reverse lights or the brake lights.
Yep.
And also too, I've noticed, if you're paying attention to the shadows, you can actually see under the cars as you try and go, oh, there's a spot up there.
Right.
And so while someone else is doing something, you just zip around and go in front of them.
And a lot of people are rushing to get somewhere, right? Whereas maybe, some patience. So they've driven past it, and you're just crawling along. All right.
Yeah,
so
and paying attention to, is there someone sitting in the car? Are the brake lights on? Is the reverse lights on?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And so it's a combination of those two things, and I'm linking it all to what I've noticed too is this is where I come back to your beliefs, your internal elastic band. Because you've heard of people get to a certain level of success and they self-sabotage. Other times when things go the other way, all of a sudden they work a little bit harder to get back to this spot. We have this internal thermostat,
and comfortable spot.
Exactly, and that comes back to I think that consistency. I did it the way it came. One of the ways it came about was, I think we've all had that experience where we look and we go, I wish I bought that stock 2 years ago. I wish I bought that house. If I had bought that house, it would have been, because it's worth so much more. And I said, well, why don't I do that the other way? Why don't I go, in 10 years, I'm going to be glad that I did this now.
Yeah.
And I switched it, and it became so that then it was shifting who I think I am. And that's where that belief identity comes in. Like me, I don't have that trouble getting the motivation when I'm clear about what I'm choosing. And I use the word choose very specifically.
Yeah.
Because you've dealt with this all the time, where you ask people, what do you want? And they go, oh, I don't know. What does that mean? It's like, and that's where, so I changed it to what do you choose? So when I ask people, I say, what do you choose? And all of a sudden you can see something going, what, I have the ability to choose? And it's like, yeah.
It's just a real short story. When Deb and I, my wife, we were 4 kids. We're now divorced.
Yeah.
Happily, and that's not being
I'd like to know that secret.
Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of people would.
Communication. I mean, we were, and I'm happy to go into that story again if you think it's worthwhile. But when we first married, we were living in Mossman in Sydney, and we were living in this dinky little, 1-bedroom apartment, and we could see the Opera House and the Harbour Bridge from our side window if you stood on your toe. But we were
that's how it was sold, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Harbour views. But we were very much into personal development, right, at that stage.
Yeah.
And we were involved with a group that they weren't a cult, right? Repeat after me, this is not a cult. It was just a bunch of really positive people that
Yeah.
had so we were doing a lot of things in that space. And so we wrote down goals, right? So we wrote down that we wanted to have um, 3 children, 2
Mm.
girls and a boy,
Yeah.
Edie, Isabel, Thomas, in that order.
Mhm.
We wrote down that we wanted to buy a house. We described the house, there was maybe 10 or different things, and this was on the fridge.
Yeah.
Every day we'd walk out and there it was on the fridge, and we'd both read it, and it's like manifesting itself. And then
Mm.
we moved house, and I put this in an envelope
Yeah.
and put it away and put it in a box, and and 2 moves later,
Yeah.
right? I'm going through this box. I pull out this envelope. Like, what's this? And I look at it, and there's the goals. And by this stage, we'd had 4 children.
Yeah.
So
You overstretched. Yeah.
always an
Overachieved.
overachiever, right?
Overachieved. Sorry, that's what I meant to say.
But the scary thing was, we wrote the names: Edie, Isabel, Thomas. We didn't write Joseph, but there were the names: 2
Yeah.
girls and a boy in that order.
Yeah.
Yeah. We bought a house. We'd done we'd lived overseas. We'd done all the things that we wanted to do, or the majority of those things in that goal. So, so that whole, and sort of coming back to consistency, it was every day we were seeing this message subliminally. That's a hard word to say, isn't it? Subliminally.
Especially this time of the morning. For those listening, it's early in the morning here. So.
Yeah, and I'm yet to have my first alcoholic drink, right? Brandy in the coffee, right?
So I went tea this morning. I should have had coffee.
So yeah, it was, and I'm now revisiting the law of attraction. So I'm listening. I've audio books as well, and I'm listening to one as well. And and I've got my storyboard now up. I've got my goals. I forgot all about it.
Yeah,
and just so that consistently reminding yourself of consistent, really hard. This is a really difficult subject to play with, isn't it? Like, yes, you go, as I said, I'm consistently inconsistent. So this is something that I knew 40 years ago or 30 years ago now, and I've played with it along the way. But this is the time where I've gone, that was so powerful. Why didn't I actually make it a part of my daily, daily ritual?
Yeah.
And I think you mentioned it earlier, like some people, when they get to their success, they self-sabotage.
Yeah.
And then they get to the bottom. So there's this level that you're comfortable with based on, this is where we're going to get really into the psychological things, and I'm way out of my depth now. But you get to a point where you're comfortable and you don't want to move from that. It's the stories of people who become millionaires because they win the lottery, and 5 years later they're exactly where they were and spend all the money.
Well, that's about 80% of people that win money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm happy.
Actually, in general, they're worse off because they've gone overboard.
I'm happy to give that a crack just to prove. So that's what I'm manifesting.
Yeah.
Not a great strategy, but anyway.
Well, the universe is a funny place. You never.
It is, isn't it? Yeah. Maybe I'll stop talking like that. No?
Well, but what you've pointed out there, that's a consistency element, which I think is really important. And certainly Napoleon Hill wrote about that in Think and Grow Rich. That was one of his key things. What you did is exactly what he wrote about. It's like you are changing, and like you said, you're changing your thought process as to how you saw your identity. You set that up. And that's why I write about the identity and beliefs, and I've kind of connected them together. But I'm thinking I might separate it out. Now that we're talking about that, the book's still in, being written by me.
Consistently.
But it's you set up that identity because as you said, and this is where, and I do deal with that a bit in the unconscious section? Because I mean, we've all had this experience where we've thought we've understood something, thought, yeah, I understood this, then gone and done it and completely screwed it up and haven't done as well as you thought you could do it. We've had that experience. I'm sure many people have had an exam where they've done that in for the younger people, you've done, you study really hard, you go, yeah, I got this nailed, and you get your result and you go, oh. And then you've also had the opposite experience where you haven't thought you were that good at it and surprised yourself with how well you did. And this is separating conscious understanding from unconscious action, because action is unconscious, and conscious and understanding is a conscious function, so that they're not linked together. You don't need to understand something consciously to be able to do it. And I guess I get that partly from my time in the military, where we did drill. You just reacted, but the reason you reacted was for all that consistently doing that behavior over and over and over and over again. And then when you get that trigger, you just respond. Similar sort of thing with your goals that you and your wife had put on the fridge. Because you were reading that every day, that seeps into your unconscious. And whether you're consciously aware of it or not, and certainly, I mean, we do choose. I mean, it was the same for me. I want, I've got one son, and I always knew it was a knowing that it was going to be a son. I wanted more children. That didn't happen, because I would have loved to have daughters as well. But the first one was always, I don't know why, it was just going to be a son. And whether I chose that or whether I knew that, I don't know. That's another clip that I've got in my little movie things. It's from the third Lightning McQueen film, where her and the Cruz Ramirez, I think is the name, the yellow car. They have an argument, and she's like, how did you know that you could do this? Race cars and be successful. Well, be a race car and be successful. And he goes, I just never thought I couldn't. Was his response, and I took that on, and so I there's times in my life where I just knew this was going to be, and it was never, I couldn't do it. Like I said, writing letters to marketing firms.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to do this. It's like, I did that to get a job working in the mines. I wrote a letter of application, and being low skilled, I wouldn't suggest doing this as a high skilled way of getting a career in a professional sense. But I was applying for I'd been in the military. I was applying for a laborish operator position in the mines. I sent an application. I wrote a letter, and this is back before had a computer. Hand wrote a letter every day and sent it off every day. And sent a letter off to all the key contractors that I knew. In 2 weeks, I got a call and said, "You seem really motivated. Would you like to come in for an interview?" And I got a job. I was it was like, it was never in question. And that's where when we talk about this, like you said, you wrote these goals out, you and your wife together. And that's part of, with Share.care, one of the 10 principles is have a plan. You had that plan. This is what we're going to do. Because how long did you live in the apartment? I would imagine that you were there for a bit, and you were reading.
Probably 18 months, something like that.
So, I mean, it takes, what, 28
days
to create a habit. You were there for 18 months reading it every day.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously that seeped right into your unconscious.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think the reverse as well, like they talk about the idiot inside, don't listen to the idiot inside you.
No.
The idiot inside you is telling you that you can't do things, right? And so it's having that external influence that then you'll never get rid of the idiot, right? They'll always be there trying to drag you down, because
is that a consistent thing? Because I question that. I mean,
do you?
Yeah,
I've always got this. I've always got this. Not it's. I guess it's a limiting belief. Like this. Are you good enough to do that? And because maybe it's because I'm I don't want to say perfectionist, but I'm not a perfectionist. That would be overstating it.
Yeah,
What's that?
See, this is how you know you're a perfectionist. You're going, I'm not a perfectionist. I'm not perfect at being a perfectionist. You're a perfectionist.
Trying to work it out, right? Yeah. So there you go. So, but yeah, it's that it's a voice inside my head that I just allow the thought to come in and then let it go through, right? And try not to, well, try. It's hard to try, but to give it no meaning all the way through, right? But if I'm not feeling positive, right? Something's just happened to me, and I'm not talking about someone cut me off on the traffic, right? Something is not going well in my life.
Yeah.
And so then what do? I try to focus on something that's positive in my life, but because I'm at that energetic low, right? Then I'm vulnerable.
Yeah.
To that, right? And in human design, they talk about shadow, right? So there's a positive side to something, but there's a shadow. And if you focus on your shadow, then all of that energy, that negative energy, comes in, right? And I've got, for those of anyone who here understands human design, I've got a lot of white space in my points, right? So that means that I take on a lot of information across everything. Right?
Yeah.
And my emotional area is totally white with no connection. So I'll cry at the drop of a hat, right?
Yeah.
Because I take on the energy. When Argentina won the World Cup, I mean, I
can relate to that.
I wasn't bawling my eyes out, but I I had so much joy for them. Not because I don't like the French, but it was just a beautiful story, right? That ended, and it was such a fantastic game. And I'm at the end there, and I've got tears rolling down my cheek, right? And I went, "What?" The football game. You don't even like the two countries that like all this. But yeah, so I don't know how I got down this rabbit hole, but
No, you're talking about the negative thoughts, because I did notice that before. You said about beating yourself up and that affecting the consistency in doing things.
Yeah. Because I've got friends who, like, everything they touch turns to gold, right? Like they just can't get it wrong. And I love them, and I'm so grateful to have them as friends, and I'm not envious of it, right? Well, a little bit maybe, but
well, you'd like that,
but do I? Would I? I don't know, right?
Yeah.
It's like I would love to have. No, I am in the best place that I possibly can be at this moment.
Yeah.
Right? Having this conversation with you, Damien, is the best possible thing that I could do right at this moment. I love it, by the way. This is not just blowing smoke up your ass, right? But I love having these conversations with you, because we actually do start. I'm hoping that part of your purpose and part of what I do is that this, the voyeurs who are listening in on this actually get some value from it, because they resonate with either you or me, or they start to question.
That's why we do it.
Where they're going, yeah, it's why we do it, right? It's so much fun.
Yeah, no, great.
But yeah, but again, it's like, stop beating yourself up, Steve. Stop beating yourself up. Enjoy the moment, and that's why in the last couple of weeks, right? I actually haven't been working. I've been I've been working, but not actively looking. And doing paid work. I've actually been doing stuff that is unpaid, but is an investment in the future for me, right? And it's all about creating value for people who potentially could use my service.
Yeah.
So and I am consistently doing that on a daily basis now, right? I wrote my business plan for 2023, and I'm going to write something about why you don't need a business plan.
Well, I think, I could understand where you're coming from there, because a lot of times we spend so much time poorly planning, I would say, planning a lot of things we don't need to.
It sort of goes back to your proposal. You write a business plan. What happens to that business plan? It sits on you write it once, you never see it again, right? For 12 months until you write another one. And that's why I'm being a little bit cheeky. I'm saying, you don't need a business plan. You need an implementation strategy, right? Something that you can, something
Yeah.
that is a plan. It's a roadmap that you look at on a consistent basis,
Mm.
once a week, once a month, and you have a look at how you're going. It's a bit like the goals,
Yeah.
right? So how am I going, right? And then you remind yourself, I forgot I had that in my plan, right? So I better be doing something about that, because if I don't do that, then I'm not going to get there, right? So the number of clients that you have to see, the number of phone
Mm.
calls you have to make, all of those sorts of business development stuff, all the things that you need to do, making sure that your accounts are having somebody there to look after all of those sorts of things.
Yeah.
Mm.
I think the point that you make there about not beating yourself up is really important, and using the example I used before, where I've been binge watching Netflix or some YouTube video or doing something like that, and then realizing, okay, and this is from my experience, what I've done is going, okay, I've done that. Actually, there's some things I need to do, and then I start doing it, but I don't beat myself up for having done that. Um,
Mm. Mm.
I'm and this is part of when we talked about, this inner critic, that, using that example, because I know a number of people that I've talked to have used that example or that terminology of the inner critic.
As opposed to the idiot, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, we have multiple different, things, a way of describing things, and we do have an. I like being the external idiot at times. I love doing stupid stuff just for fun.
Yeah.
And I'll often do that just for to get a laugh or do that. So I think the idiot's a good a good persona. It makes, and that's why, like, when I wrote the code, Cher has the code. I wanted to bring back the Knight's Code of chivalry,
Right.
because I found that we're told so much of what we can't do, and there's no real guidance. Especially, I would say probably more so for guys than there is for girls. That this whole PC era and stuff like that. I just find that we got a little bit lost of what in focusing on what we can't do.
That's it. That's interesting. We'll come. Well, let's circle back to that one. I'd love to dig into
Yeah,
that
well,
one.
that's where it was like looking at, and it's on the share.care website. I've written the code up there, but yeah, this inner critic, um, and and I'm going to link this too, because you mentioned cults before as well, and as much as I one thing I learned from cults was, the recruiting strategy was really good, and it's something that I implemented in my life to help this not beat yourself up. Oh, before I go, with the not beating yourself up part of things, is like if I've done something and then I realize, so I switched it. Rather than criticizing myself for saying, "Hey, you shouldn't have been watching this," I actually go, "Good on you for realizing that you need to do this."
Mm,
And
mm,
and there's a group of guys that we get together now with, and these are, mostly dads that have, in a bit of trouble, in the sense of, having
mhm,
difficulty with access to their children and stuff like that. Uh,
mm,
and I've called it mates looking forward, because it's like to get out of, and it partly, comes from an experience with my dad. I'll cut the story really short, but he was in a moping part of his life, where he was whinging and complaining about how things weren't fair and stuff like that. And I wrote him a letter and just said, "Get your shit together. I'm sick of
mm,
listening to you,
mm,
and here's some books to read." And I think Think and Grow Rich was in there, Seven Habits was in there, and turn your life around. And he actually did. He actually, and he still refers to that letter today, going, "That
mm,
saved me." But it was about looking forward, and that's where, from my perspective, what I do is to, because one of the things, and this is what's in, Be the Black Hole. I've actually changing that dynamic of, because we talk about yin and yang, and there's where for every, for the light, when you're on the light side, there's got to be a dark side. There's got to be
mm,
Darth Vader to the Luke Skywalker type thing,
mm,
and that's
mm,
something that's been forever there. I question that now. And I actually don't think it exists. And I'm stealing from Shakespeare here, and I think it's in the Bible as well. So that's a pretty much older book than Shakespeare. But I don't, so I can't. I quote certain sections of the Bible, but I grew up Catholic, but I can't be Catholic because I don't feel guilt anymore. So.
I'm a non-practicing Buddhist, so.
Well, there you go. Much more peaceful. But there's a chapter in the book called "There Is No Positive or Negative," and I'm drawing from Shakespeare and Hamlet, where they talk about I think it's Scene 2, Act 2, where it says, "Nothing is good or bad. Thinking makes it so." Now, I treat events as an event. So it's because if you're going to focus on thinking positive, it means there's got to be a negative. Because you know how that works when you're thinking. You can't think of a yellow Volkswagen. If I tell you don't think of a yellow Volkswagen, you've got to reference it to not think about it. So the thinking and the philosophy that I'm putting forward is that it's not a negative or a positive event. It's an event. How you think about it shapes what it means to you. So again, taking those negative and positive out, what it means to you. And so what I do now when an event happens, my thought process is, how can I use this to get what I choose? And again, coming back to what I choose. But the thing is, the presupposition to that is that I've chosen something. So I'm moving towards a direction. So everything that happens, and I've had some pretty extreme things happen. Some of these things I can't talk about publicly. And there's legislation that prevents it. But those things that have happened, it's like it's like, how do I use this? How does this make me? And everything that has happened I can now use to move forward. It's like, and it might be a case where something happens and I've got to learn something because I don't have the skill yet.
Can we unpack that a little bit? Is it?
Yeah.
So I love the. So we've got, okay, an event happens to you. I agree that it's how you interpret it. It was a good thing or a bad thing. Or you can just go, it just is, right? I'm a magnet, and magnets just attract, right? So whatever it is that you're attracting. So maybe it, you attracted that because you needed that at that point in your life.
Yeah.
And so therefore, you have let's go to the extreme. You have a massive car accident and you end up in hospital.
Yeah.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Yeah.
Well, it just is. Right. And so what was it that you needed in your life to cause the fact that you needed that to have that accident, or that accident occurred to you? Or was it just an accident and then it just turned up in your life? Did you actually attract it, or did it just happen to you? And then it's your interpretation of that as to how you feel about that. So you can either go, well, with me, I'm in bed for 6 months and I can't work, or the perception then is that, oh, great, I've got 6 months, I could do a university degree, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. So
there's two parts as you're talking about that. One, I want to talk about, when you say this car accident happened, and part of that philosophy that I've got of nothing is good or bad, thinking makes it so, comes from, and I think it was a Chinese, or maybe somewhere in Asia, there's a story, and depends on where you come from, whether that story's there, but there's a farmer and he has a horse. The horse runs away, so that's bad. The next day the horse comes, know the story. The next day the horse comes back, and it brings another horse with it, so that's good. But then while the horse needs to be trained, while breaking the horse in, the father's son falls off the horse, breaks his leg. That's bad. The following day, and the village goes to war, and the son can't go because he's got a broken leg. So was the horse running away good or bad? And that's where,
Mm.
again, coming back to that
Mm.
philosophy, and the other part that I want to touch on that is this question of why. I don't like why questions. They're bad. I mean, yeah, if you want to understand how the universe works and stuff like that, that can be a good question to ask. But in those situations where, in everyday life, this is where it comes back to conscious understanding and unconscious action. To consciously understand, that's a why question. Yes, if you want to consciously understand, that's a good one. You want to get into philosophy and all that kind of stuff, and why? Then that
So
can.
when you say why, you mean why did this happen,
Why did this happen?
why is my purpose?
Well,
Or
I
why
want
did
to
this
talk about
happen?
the car accident, for example.
Right.
That's
Yep.
a
Yep.
practical thing. So the car accident
Why
happens.
did this
Why
happen?
did this
Yep.
happen? And it's
Mm.
like, that's not a question you can answer.
Yeah.
There's so many things, and so I find it, and because I'm anally retentive in being efficient, I want to get to where I want to get to really quickly, and I don't want to be wasting time. So I was like, that's why I never got the why thing. It's like I don't
Mm.
need to know why. I just want to get there. I want to.
Mm.
I feel it, and I guess that probably comes from the Wayne Dyer thing, where he talks about neurotics and no limit people. And he says, a neurotic, he uses the example of, he likes to walk down the beach. And he said, I'll be walking on the beach and someone will say, why, where are you going? He goes, I'm just walking on the beach. And they say, well, how far are you going to go? And he goes, down there. And they say, well, what if you get all the way down there and you don't want to walk anymore? And he's like, well, I'll get a taxi home. You know, and so this whole, he goes, I'm doing it because I know inside me that it's right for me.
Mm.
And that's probably part of that intuitive trusting and listening to yourself. And I know from my perspective, because I've done a lot of things, just, that it's just like it felt right at the time. So I decided to do that.
Mm.
And that's part of too, you obviously need to temper that. And that's why one of the codes is, and I'm just want to read it correctly. Where is it? Finish what you start and consider carefully what you start. That's one of the codes.
Mm.
So it's like, so if you do start something, you finish it. Because a lot of times we go, I want to do that, and we'll do a few things and then drop it.
Mm.
But that's why those two are together. Finish what you start and consider carefully what you start.
Mm.
Because a lot of things I did, I started and I did do it. I finished it, and then I moved on to the next thing. But that's where I think the why question is really not, it's good. Again, if you want to understand how things work and stuff like that, you want to consciously understand, then why is a good question, because it's
Mm.
like you're trying to understand how they work. But if you want to act, if you want to do,
Mm.
that's an unconscious function, and you don't need to understand why to act. You just
Mm.
act.
You got trust.
It's
Mm.
like, I mean, I pick up this cup. You can't see it. There it is. I pick up this cup. Do I need to understand all the muscles that I need to move in my fingers, my hands? I don't need to understand that. I
Mm.
couldn't consciously I couldn't consciously pick up that cup.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
You can't make all those muscles move
Yep.
conscious. It has to be unconscious. And that's where, coming back to, unpacking that whole, nothing is good or bad to me. And it's like, again, maybe it's because I'm lazy. I don't want to go through this process of, why did this happen? And then I've got to work it out. And part of that was, there's a whole regression thing going on, because I looked at that, from my past, and there's some things that happened in my past, and you go, oh, why did all that happen? And what does that mean? It's like,
Mm. Mm.
I'm going here, so I'm going to be this person. I
Yep.
don't need to understand all, the crappy things that happened in my past, and I don't need to go through regression theory and understand why it all happened. It happened.
Mm.
It's done.
Mm.
I'm me now, and I'm going this direction.
Do you think part of the reason people think that way, particularly around, so woe is me, well, why did this happen to me, is because of comparisons with other people? Is that they then start to judge themselves based on what they know or who they know, and
Well,
feel inadequate relative to
I
those?
I wonder if that's linked to envy, and that's a sin. because I'm Catholic.
Mm.
And so you shouldn't do that anyway.
Yeah.
And comparing, and yeah, I wonder, and because I like this, and it's one of my little movie clips as well from the movie Enchanted, the Disney movie Enchanted, where you got Prince Charming, and there's a scene where they're in the real world, so they've come out of the cartoon world, and I can't remember the whole movie now, but I've just got that scene. They come out of the cartoon world, they're in the real world, they're looking for the girl, and he's there with his aide, and they're in this dingy hotel room, and there's there's old school TV there, and there's one of those soap opera, not soap opera, one of those daily talk shows, like your Oprah Winfrey type things on there, and they're talking about liking yourself, and there's this conversation on, and the aide sitting there watching that going, and he gets up and he goes to go out, and then he stops at the door and turns to Prince Charming and says, "Sire, do you like yourself?" And Prince Charming goes, "Yes. What's not to like?" And it's like, so I've taken that attitude from myself and going from myself as me, internally me, not my behaviors. Some of my behaviors could be a lot better.
Yeah, right.
And I work on that. But me as a person, so I separate the behavior from the person. And I wonder when you talk about this, this self-criticism and stuff like that, and comparing yourself to other people, I think comparing is bad anyway. So, and I'm very fortunate, I think, as a child, my mum was very much, it doesn't matter what other people say, it doesn't matter what other people think, do what you do. And so I've had that. There has been times in my life where I have been concerned about it because I've got into that. But I think because I had that at a young age, I don't really care. And I really have instilled that with my son from an early age. Was telling him, I ask him all the time, "Do you like yourself?" It's important to like you. You must like yourself. You as a person, don't worry about your behaviors; they're different. And I can see that in his behavior. He's very comfortable in his own way of doing things. And so I'm more wondering whether it's linked to that liking yourself, that need to compare to yourself to other people, is because there's a hole somewhere, and you're going, well, am I good enough? Am I not good enough? To me, it's like, well, I am good enough.
I had my brother is he's 2 years younger than me. As we grew up, we were very, very close. We're still very, very close. He's living in the New South Wales. I'm up in Brisbane.
Yeah.
He, as a 30-year-old, had a very traumatic personal experience. Ended up, he was he spent a little bit of time, smoking dope and doing silly things as in his youth. But he ended up with this psychotic episode, and ended up, and this is when you could still have hospitals that were psych wards, and lock people up without their consent, right? And so we actually put him into, he was in a fetal position, couldn't move, put him into this hospital. He managed, we almost didn't get him out, right? So they tried to keep him locked up, but because we put him in voluntarily, we could get him out voluntarily, but only just. Anyway, so he spent a long time in this chemical imbalance. He's also had 2 massive car accidents where he's shattered. He's been in hospital for 6 months twice, right? Yeah. And we were having this conversation, and we were having this chat, and he just started crying.
Yeah.
Because he was at this low ebb of his life, right?
Yeah.
What he felt was his life. And, he's saying, I don't know whether, why this is happening. It was psychotic behavior. And, the medication that he's on, they had to change it. So he's going through all these things. And I said to him, mate, the only difference between you and me is that you have a chemical imbalance and I don't.
Yeah.
All the emotions that you go through on a daily basis, I go through those on a daily basis as well. Yeah. It's just that they're not the cycles aren't as huge, right? So when you feel a high, you've got this euphoria,
Yeah.
and when you have a low, it's like it's total depression. And the chemical imbalance, that's why you're on medication, is to try and keep your
Yeah.
balance, to try and keep that balance. So that so I just, and so I just said, stop comparing yourself with. It's hard to say stop comparing. I don't know that I actually used those words, but the intention was to get
Mm.
him to think about the need. He doesn't need to compare himself to other people, because I said to him, I've never been prouder of you at this very moment,
Mm.
because of, I don't, there, but for the grace of God go I. I
Yeah.
don't know if I was in your situation whether I'd be coping as well as you cope,
Mm.
right? Because of he's had 30 years of putting up with this shit in his life.
Yeah.
And I go, mate, that's a strong constitution right there. So don't stop comparing yourself with other people. Think about, and this is the mindset, and it's hard when you're in those situations. And so I'm not suggesting that it's easy for him to have that mindset change. He's working on it. He's got lots and lots of support around him, and he's doing his best that he possibly can.
Yeah.
It's 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 um it's the challenge is comparing yourself. So I'm comparing myself with him, and I'm going, shit, man, you have so much more. You have so much more than me. It's just
Yeah.
manifesting itself in a different way.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, and I mean, we've got to acknowledge too the chemical. There are people that do have that, the chemical side of things, and there's a lot more complexity to that than I think we fully understand. But also too,
Mm.
it's interesting how the body works as well. That we can actually produce those chemicals ourselves too. So it's like a chicken and egg thing.
Mm. Mm.
Where people take medication to balance that. And I've gone out with people that have been in that situation, and haven't taken the medication, and as a result, the behaviour was got pretty extreme.
Mm.
And the same token too, there's other people that seem to be able to manage that and produce the chemicals themselves. So, I mean, I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done to fully understand that.
Mm. Mm.
Um, And similar sort of thing, like, because as you mentioned there that he said to you, "Why is this happening to me?" Which I said, "I really hate that question, because it's not productive."
Mm.
And
Well, it's absolutely, yeah. Whether he asked that question in those words, but it was definitely feeling less valuable, right?
yeah,
Feeling that he was a burden on everybody around him because of who he is. And I'm going, mate, you are an inspiration. Really, you are an inspiration. And it's just that lens in which you look at it. Yeah.
well, I wonder if that again comes back to that consistency of what you tell yourself.
Mm.
Because, I mean, I dealt with that, with an employee, um, who was hiding for quite a long time that they were feeling, they were experiencing depression, uh,
Mm.
and masking it. And well, they thought they were masking it. They were doing a shit job. But it was progressively getting worse. And I'm like, I know you're a good person. I know you can perform really well, is what I'm thinking. And I'm going, what the hell is going on?
Mm.
Um, and it finally came out. So I spent time with this person and said, "Look, hey, this is what you need," because they were getting ready. You're gonna fire me, that kind of thing. And it's like,
Yep.
I really love working with you, and I don't want to be fired and all this. And look, don't worry about that. That's not what we're here about. What we need to do is move forward.
Mm.
Um, and so I asked a few questions about how they approach things, and you know, and what they didn't do is, again, that critic was coming in feeling that they weren't good themselves, not about the job, putting a lot of pressure on themselves. I said, "Well, what do you do? What do you tell yourself that's good about yourself?"
Mm.
And they're confused by the question. And so, well, what I want you to do now this is part of your job description, I'm writing it in, that every morning when you wake up, you will write out 5 things you're grateful for and 3 things that you're good at. Even if you're repeating the same thing that you've written before, you'll do that. That's your requirement. And within a week, their whole attitude changed dramatically, because and I only said 7 days because I wanted to get to the 28 days, but I thought 28 is just going to be overwhelming. Let's go for 7 days where you do it every day for 7 days, because if you've done that, again, that consistency, you do that, all of a sudden it the habit starts forming. But the change in this person was dramatic, from that consistently going, okay, not why am I doing this, and said the comparison to other people. It's I think that's really, really bad, and maybe that's coming back to what we started with earlier about the social media. And the thing with social media, it's not even real anymore. I mean, none of the images are.
It never was.
Who posts a crappy image of themselves on social media or talks about a shitty situation? LinkedIn has become that. It's just become this. I was going to say cesspit, but that's probably not. That's probably harsh. But I look at it and just going, it's just people posting motivational stuff to get likes, and it's like
it's a facade.
Yeah,
it's a facade. It's this thin layer, like I know we sort of jumping all over the place a little bit here, but I love it. People go, "How are you?" Right, and the natural response is, "I'm well, I'm good." How are things going? Oh, they're great, right?
Yeah,
bullshit. Bullshit. Right? They're not great, right?
No.
We've just gone through 2.5 years 2 years of crap, right? Now, some people have benefited from it. I actually had a pretty good time through COVID, right? Not necessarily financially, but I actually didn't. Sorry?
The lockdown was great for me in so many
different ways. I thought it was, and I'm leaving aside all of the horrible things that happened and the deaths that happened to people as a result of COVID and a whole bunch of other things. And I still think we probably have yet to experience the fallout, the financial impact and fallout on people who have been affected by it, right?
Yeah.
But for me personally, I actually thought it was a good thing. I thought it was the universe telling the world, hey, listen, you guys are out of control. We just need to do something here to pull you back into line. I don't know whether it's true or not, but just felt like everything was going at 1,000,000 miles an hour and people were just living in this fantasy world. And so like people go, hey, how you going? I go, well, okay, not great. Not great. If I'm not great, I'm not great, right? Yeah. So then it's like, well, I'm frightened that if I tell somebody that maybe I'm not going as well as I should appear to be, that they might not then use me as a service provider, because why would you want to deal with someone who's not successful?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I only want to deal with successful people. Why? All the gurus that are on these platforms, why are they on there? If they were so freaking good, why haven't they retired? Why aren't they, spending their billions of dollars on something that is not on themselves? Why are you now? I've made $1 million and I've made a gazillion billion dollars, right? And I'm still doing what I'm doing. Well, stop doing it.
Yeah.
Stop doing it, right?
Yeah.
Go and do something valuable with that money that you've got now. You can only wear one pair of jeans at a time. So it's bullshit.
Yeah.
Right. And we believe it, right? Because
too.
Sorry?
It's easier to put that facade up there now. It costs much money to do it. Doesn't take much.
It's a website. Okay, maybe I'm being a bit disingenuous to it. But
I think you're right. There's key things I look for in that regard. Where, if someone's got a Gmail as their email address, well, or they've just got their mobile number and they don't have an office, it's like, well, and it's not to say they're not doing a good job. They potentially are doing a good job, But if you're an established business, you've got more than a Gmail and a mobile number.
Yeah, I'm talking more about the people who turn up on your feed, right? And they're they're paid ads. They're on YouTube or
Yeah.
Google ads or something like that. They're dropping you emails that talking about how great they are,
Yeah.
right? Because I mean, and again, I was around when the internet first started back in the late 90s, right? So 95, 96, email, I think, was when we started using email. Might have been earlier than that, I can't remember. But things like WinFax, which was you would send a fax using a computer. Oh man, God.
Yeah, no, I remember
that was revolutionary. I'd send 600 faxes. I'd turn it on at 6 o'clock at night. I'd come in at 6 o'clock in the morning, the last one going through,
Yeah.
Now you're sending 10,000 emails at the click of a button.
Yeah.
But at that point in time, when SEO were the easiest thing for an SEO, you wrote 600 words and you made sure that the keyword that you wrote, that you were looking to attract people to, was just embedded in it didn't have to make sense.
Yeah.
Because the algorithm wasn't smart enough yet, right? And so I remember getting, how do you make money on the internet? You teach people how to make money on the internet.
Yeah, definitely.
Right?
Well, it's the same, how do you make money in stocks? You teach people how to make money.
The 1995, the ebook that is like, the six habits to consistency. Right?
Yeah,
like stop.
That's why it's always fascinating.
Bullshit.
You talk about, like, what you're talking about there is, this people putting this facade about, and I mean, I think you need to be careful where you share things. I mean, for me, I have a couple of references to Crocodile Dundee that I love coming back to, and I noticed.
That's not a knife.
That's a different circumstance. The one you mentioned about, this. I mean, and this is drawing from Wayne Dyer as well, How to Be a No Limit Person, because he talks about not having a bad day, and he says, like, a lady comes up to him after a seminar and says, come on, tell the truth. Don't you ever feel depressed? And he goes, no, I don't. And she goes, oh, that's depressing. But it's there's a philosophy there and a way of thinking, and that's where so nothing is good or bad. Thinking makes it. I don't have bad days at all. I just don't. My everything is useful and everything is helpful, so I don't have bad days, and I'm. But the reason I don't is because of a foundation that I have. I'm not trying to pretend to people. I don't even really market. Like, from a business perspective, I don't want to be. And that comes back to, that's where I wanted to come to the cult thing that you mentioned before. One of the key things I learned about how cults operate is their recruiting process. It's brilliant, and I was like, I wish I'd learned that earlier. But there was a couple of books that I read where actually the guy who wrote it grew up in a cult. So he talked about that and from a marketing perspective. And he said, from a marketing perspective, the cult person they'll have a couple of key questions to see if there's interest. And if there's interest, then they go further. If there's no interest, they don't waste time. They move on to the next person. And so that's that's probably your part of the marketing, which is, I've forgotten the term for it, where you're testing to see if they're a fit. That's my approach that I take. I don't seek to sell myself to people. It's like the teaser thing here I mentioned before. It's like I've had the conversation. Okay, there's a little bit of interest. Okay, it seemed to be that interest is genuine, but they've got other things to do. How do I then motivate that? Well, I did the little teaser brochure, and all of a sudden, this is happening straight away. But with the previous department, I'd mentioned a couple of times. I didn't push it. Just when it came up, I mentioned it. Wasn't interested. I mentioned again, wasn't interested. So, and that person is still not interested because it came up just recently. It was like, okay, that's fine. I'm not pushing it from that marketing perspective. And that's where we're talking about how this, this putting this facade forward. It's like I don't, and I don't try and pretend to be something that I'm not.
Mm,
Like this
mm.
is who I am, and if there's a
And
fit,
there's that, yeah, it's that.
then we do business. If there's not a fit, and I'm very strict about. I remember some, and they weren't clients. I was doing a training. There was a group of 3 plumbers, and they had it was a big business. They had a $15 million turnover, in their business, but they said they were working flat out. They're dealing with a lot of crap. They didn't have time for their family, so they're working 7 days a week. Didn't have time for their family, dealing with a lot of crap. And they thought about it and they said, let's just what we're going to do is we're just going to cull. Get anyone that's a pain in the ass client or not even a good client. We're just going to let them go.
Mm,
Their income drops substantially. Substantially. I think it dropped. It was at least, if my memory serves, it was at least a third, if not 2/3. So it went from 15 million to 10 million, or I
mhm,
can't remember if it was 2/3 or a third, but either way, that's a massive drop in income.
mm, mm,
What they found was they had more time. So they went from working 7 days a week to working 5 days a week, just normal hours, not long hours. The biggest thing they noticed was they made more money,
profit. Mhm,
had more profit. Um, and that's where, again, coming back to this whole, putting the facade out and telling people yes, I think you need to be careful about who you tell. And that's where I come back to that Crocodile Dundee thing. I love
mm,
the part in the movie. There's a scene where they're having a cocktail party and they're talking about psychology and a psychiatrist. And she says, don't you have a psychiatrist in Walkabout Creek? And he goes, no, we just have Wally. If we have a problem, we tell Wally. Wally tells everybody else, no more problem. And I think it's important to talk about those kind of things. You need to do that. You need to ask for help. The hardest help I've ever asked for was there was a point where I was in a really difficult situation, and the person I turned to was my dad, and that was the hardest help I've ever asked for. And my dad helped me, yeah, and
mm.
but it was hard to do that.
Yeah, vulnerability,
But
bravado, all of those sorts of things. But sort of coming back to the point that you made about the clients, and I think sometimes we're too eager to take on clients when in fact I think a better strategy is to make it difficult for them to choose you,
yeah,
because if they're prepared to jump through the hurdles that you put in front of them, then
mm,
they're actually ready for you, right? Whereas if you let everybody into the bucket,
yeah,
and then you're having to convince them that that you're the right person for them, and it's not treat them mean to keep them keen type, it's not using power for good, for evil, not good. It's just being really clear on who you want to work with, what, the service that you provide, how you can deliver it, authenticity, being vulnerable, asking for help. There's a lot, and be consistent about doing that, right? So be authentic. I think authenticity is probably
mm,
the one thing that social media has covered over
yeah,
and doesn't allow, and then there's this judgment, oh well, you're not as good as everybody else. Now there's a whole bunch of people who are now posting on all of these things. They're giving their sob stories to try and get sympathy, to get the likes, right? It's like it's the little kid who's trying to get attention, right?
yeah,
2 kids, both come from the same parents. One's brilliant academically, sports, right, gets a lot of attention. What happens to the other one? They become, the nasty,
get
difficult
attention.
child. Why? Because they want to get attention.
Yeah.
they're both going it. So,
I think the
people,
proviso to add to that too, with what you're talking about, um, is you've got to have something of value to add. And I think of looking at a lot of things too, when I look at a number of people, when they're marketing calls and marketing emails, I should say, not calls, but I look at what there's somewhere I'd have looked at it and gone, well, you actually don't have as much skill as you think you have.
mm,
Um, because I find out there's a lot of that out there where, and you get that in the consulting thing, as you know, and you've been in it for a long time, but someone has a brainwave and go, oh, I've found something for myself. Now I'm going to help everybody else. But you've just got your toe in the water. I've been doing this stuff for 30 years. It's like there's a lot of knowledge. I think it shows that I've got a lot of knowledge.
Yeah.
But same token too, the other thing with that is, and this is where belief comes in, and we come circling back to that, is that people will see what they want to see. And I've been doing this long enough to know that if the client doesn't want help, as much as they might be whinging and complaining, as they often do, they really don't want to do what's necessary. Because I find most things are very easy to fix. Change is easy too. I think change it's getting to the point where you're ready to change. That's the challenge for most people in most organizations. The change is simple. I did that. I did one where we had an organization, one of my clients, it was a smaller company, and they were using paper timesheets. So they're an engineering fabrication shop, and a lot of the people were older people as well, and still using paper. Log in timesheets. This is what you did, and you fill it out, and then the person then has to write.
Data entry,
has to data entry it and stuff like that. So we're going to an electronic system, full on app on your phone. This is your timesheet. This is how we're doing it. So we've got these ingrained people that have been doing this for. Some of them have been with the company for 30 years, doing this the same way, and we're implementing this new technology. And then that's a big ask to get them to want to do that. So I thought about it and so I did a 2-hour training with them about, I was explaining how, what I wanted to do was show them the benefits of how this was better than the old system and how it's going to be easier for them and things like that. I also wanted to cover off that, because as you know, like anything, there's going to be complaints, things are not going to go right. There's going to be issues, and some of those are, well, I'd say a lot of them are user issues that they haven't understood it properly, and then they're doing it the wrong way, and then they're having problems, but they blame the system. So I said, okay, there's going to be problems, there's going to be issues. Come to me straight away, or come to straight away, and we'll sort it out. So I covered that off. Also, too, it was mostly older guys. So the first thing I said when I started, I said, look, this is going to be a bit of a challenge. I don't want you to be scared. And all I went, I'm not going to be scared.
It's funny. Did you have, another an approach could be that bring your 13-year-old son or grandchild with you to work for a day, and then they'll show you how to do it.
Yeah, well, there's that. But what I found with this thing, because I talked it through, and I went through step by step. By the time we got to the end of the session, because I also said what we're going to do is we're going to have this system, we're going to use the old, so we're going to do both together, because we want to. And we didn't need to, but I just said we're going to keep this as a backup in case something goes wrong.
Parallel run. You always run a parallel run.
Yeah, and it's like I just want to, and the thing was, we got to the end. Half of them had downloaded the app. Well, at least half had downloaded the app, signed in, and had been playing with it during the training.
Yeah. Because I think there's
come up to me afterwards and said, "Why do we have to run it separately? What duplicate? Why can't we just go straight to the new system?" And within 3 weeks, everyone was doing it.
Yeah,
and that's why the change is not hard.
Yeah, I think there's a misconception too that older people don't understand technology.
Well, that's true.
I'm all over it. There's just some applications that I choose not to be proficient at. Right. Yeah. But the ones that I need to be proficient at, I am. Right. And so I just don't need to understand how Instagram works.
Yeah. I played around with Facebook ads for a while there, and when I don't need to know this, and I don't want to. I don't use Facebook feed at all either. Yep. And that's one of the beliefs I challenge as well, that younger people learn faster than older people. That doesn't, to me, make sense. As an older person, you have I remember this from when I did I've been riding motorbikes forever, but just never had a license. And so I did the right thing. I I hadn't been riding for a while, but I was going to buy a bike and start riding. So I went to the school, and they talked about this, that the older people doing this will learn to ride faster, but also too, they're more likely to not be involved in an incident on the road because their life experience is so much more that they will be aware of things that younger people won't.
Defensive and on the
Yeah.
road, yeah.
And so that as a principle is like, well, that's like, you're as an older person, you should learn faster because you've got so much more experience to draw on.
Mm,
And the more I thought about that, and this is where we come back to this consistency, is we talk about that internal thermostat and your beliefs setting you where you are.
mm,
If we get so stuck in holding on to who we are, we're not going to learn anything. Because to learn something new, you have to let go of something.
yep.
Young people, especially young children, you tell them, you go there, that blade of grass, that grass, everything out there's alive. Like it's alive, and they're asking questions, and they're open to new information.
Mm,
Whereas we get stuck in, as you see, we get protective. We want to hold on. No, we've got to hold on to our beliefs. Oh no, it can't be different, and so we don't learn. It's not that we can't learn as quickly. We actually should learn quicker. We're just not letting go of what we know, so we can't learn anything. It's not that
mm.
you can't, you're just choosing not to. Kind
There's
of
an interesting phenomenon, is another hard word to say, um,
phenomenon.
phenomenon, um, uh, around reverse mentoring. I don't know
Right.
if you've heard about that. It's like,
No.
older people particularly in management, in larger organizations
Yeah.
who, we always have this impression that, someone comes straight out of university, they've got an MBA, but they've got no life skills or
Mm.
business acumen.
Yeah.
And so they come in and, they're cocky. I was, that 32-year-old with a lot
Yeah.
of hubris coming in. And then the bias of the people who are older look at that person and go, you young whippersnapper, what do you know? And then from the young person's point of view goes, well, I'm educated, I know you don't know anything, the old way of doing things. So there's now if you let go of that judgment, right? So if the younger person's looking at the older person and letting go of the judgment that you're doing things the old way, the reason we are successful is because of the ways that we're doing things. And if we go back 10, 15 years, 20 years in this business, we can see that there has been progression, right? The larger the business, the harder it is to move forward.
Mm.
And then from the older persons or the more senior person in the business to look down at the ranks, and look for what genius is inside those ranks. Where is that person? What lessons have they learned that I just haven't had time to learn? What can they bring in? And when you have that collective, accountability, I call it the collective accountability. It's when everybody is accountable for the success of the business. It's not I'm better than you or you don't know what you're doing. It's that it's an acknowledgement of all of that, and just opening up that communication so that and it's sort of a little bit circling back to the relationship with Deb and I. It was the communication that we had was very open.
Yeah.
In that, very early on the piece, and then the communication closed down because of circumstances.
Yeah.
But because we put a foundation in place, consistently been communicating at a particular level, then it enabled us when we did get to a point where we were, when we were emotionally disconnecting, we were able to deal with it in the right way. So in a business sense, building that trust, having those having strong communication, letting go of your judgment of other people, being open, being curious, right? How did you get to be so successful, or how did you get to be in that position in your in this career? How did you what was university different to the university that I went to? And you're curious about that, and then it opens up that dialogue, and then people can they can come to a conversation without judgment. And I think that's gold when you get to that point.
I think that, I mean, yeah, what you're saying there is very valuable, because it seems to stem under the point of, as you say, well, what can I learn from this person, and being open to listening and learning from their experience. Yeah, I completely agree that, it's not, just because someone's young doesn't mean they don't have experience. They have different experiences. They might not have as many experiences,
Mm,
but
mm.
that doesn't mean you can't learn from that. There's a number of young people, mm, and I don't agree with the whole thing that, the youth are lazy either. I know a lot of older people that are lazy and don't
I,
do
I
a
I
good
think
job.
I think they're taking your lead, Damien, is that they don't mind working. They just don't want to work unnecessarily hard to get the same result. So if they can find which I think is smart, isn't it? And I mean, if you can go from A to B, and directly and efficiently
Mm.
versus going A, X, Z, B, like it just took you twice as much effort to get there. And if you had, anyway, so
That's innovation though, and I 100% agree with that, that
mm,
you want to get there as quickly as possible, and that's the whole point of learning and growing is, because, like, I mean, you look at, if you were to dig a hole and use a shovel to dig a hole, it's going to take a long time. Whereas, I had that recently where I was, doing some gardening, as using that as an example, and I had, was it 2 or 3 cubic meters of potting mix delivered to use, and it's like, I could have shoveled that into, a wheelbarrow and wheeled it out. I went and hired one of those, tracked little.
yeah, yeah, little backhoe type thingies.
Yeah, it was a,
Yeah,
well, little, yeah, and had a back
wheelbarrow.
on it,
Mm,
just and that just made my life so much easier. So I completely agree with that whole learning process and being,
mm,
listening to what's going on, and it reminded me when you're talking about that of listening to, it was Nelson Mandela. He talked about his dad was, one of the tribal leaders in the area that they were in at that time, and what they did is when they got together, he would have everyone else speak first. So everyone spoke and gave their opinion before he gave his opinion. So he got to listen to all these different opinions before, then deciding what to do, and voicing what he thought to do. And that's where, you do have that stereotypical of, the older, and if you're in that mindset, I think it's not very helpful to just go, "Hey, I know what, no, I've been here for years, and you should listen to
mm,
me."
mm,
That's dumb.
mm,
I'm
mm.
just going to call that out. That
Yeah.
if you're sitting there talking, and I know, in those situations, if you're not listening to what's going on, as I think you mentioned here, we got 2 ears and 1 mouth in one of these. It's like, we if you're not listening, um, then you're not learning, and you're not gaining information. Um, that's one of the things in the negotiation magic course that I've got is, the one of the key powers you have is listening. You need to gather information. You shouldn't be talking. You should be asking questions, and that's in life in general. It's better to ask questions than it is to
Mm.
make a statement. You'll
Yeah,
learn something.
be curious, be curious. There's a
Yeah.
great scene in Ted Lasso where I don't know where he's. Um, have you watched Ted Lasso?
No, I haven't seen it. So.
It's hilarious. It's a very funny thing, but he's the previous owner of the soccer club that he's coaching, is being a real arsehole and is threatening a whole bunch of things. Anyway, they meet in a pub and they um, are betting on, this guy either keeping his share in the soccer club or letting it go, right? And they're going to play darts.
Yeah.
And so Ted Lasso goes up and starts playing darts and talking, and this mega millionaire billionaire is talking about it, and yeah, okay, I can beat you, right? And then as Ted Lasso is talking about his childhood, how he and his father played darts
Yeah.
every day, and he starts throwing left-handed now, not right-handed. And he said, and the point was that if you were curious enough to ask me questions about my past, you would have known that that I played darts with my father every day, and like he's hitting bullseyes with this left hand.
Yeah.
So it's like making assumptions about people, and being the one who's talking and not listening and not being curious. The impact is, well, and he lost it. So anyway, there's a little bit of an aside. I'm trying to feel like I'm competing with your with your movie plots. I had to drop one in here somehow.
Yeah, well, that's but it's a good point that you said about listening. It is about, being paying attention to what's going on
Yeah.
around you, and that's I think gives you a lot of power, to be able to deal with the real situation rather than what you think the situation is going to be. Because if you misunderstand something, then you're not operating from where the situation is,
Yep.
which yeah, it's and it's listening is and being consistent in your listening, and it's something, and I know I didn't do very well when I was younger. I knew everything. You weren't going to tell me otherwise. I was an expert on everything, and it's now I'm very confident in what I do know, and do things very well, and I think the reason I stay on point and on at I would say the top of my game is because I'm constantly listening. We're having these conversations as you're talking. I'm taking that on. I've got my notepad next to me where I'm writing down key points so it sticks in my memory. Just the fact that making a note, that'll stick it into my mind so I can. That's something I do consistently. I love using the movie reference quote. It's like I think it's the movie Hot Fuzz, where it's Simon Pegg and but the but he says the most powerful weapon you've got is your notepad. And as someone's talking to him, he writes it down and it says something, and he writes it down. The guy goes, it's like, what?
Yeah,
Right,
blunt
really,
pencil is better than a sharp mind.
yeah. Well, it is. It's. I mean, and that's being consistent about that. Being making that a behavior of how you deal with your life, and I think that's really important. Coming back to what you mentioned earlier about writing out, this is what where I'm headed, because that's what you
Mm,
and your wife did. You sat down in your
mm,
little, your first apartment that you bought together, and said, "This is our plan for our future."
mm.
And then you put it on the fridge, which that's gold. It's where you're going to see it every day, and that sunk into your mind. So it became a consistent habit where you're reminding yourself of the future you're creating. I mean, that's it's a simple instruction. It's not
Yep.
hard to do. People say life is hard. Life is not hard. We make life
Make
hard.
life hard. Yeah. So tell me, Damien, I'm conscious of time,
Yeah.
and it's been a great chat. We when we set this up, we said, how are we going to get through an hour of conversation? I think we're at 2. So if you've hung in, dear listener, thank you very much for this. I just have one thought or question. You talked about gratitude, right? And
Mm.
I think that's a, a, a way of not focusing on yourself, but focusing on external things or what you are grateful for.
Yeah.
Do you consistently journal or write down gratitude? What would be the one tip that you would have around that particular activity?
It's a consistent thing for me that I do it. I didn't get into the habit of writing it down. It wasn't something that worked for me. I think it is useful depending on your mindset, because I've always been a pretty grateful person. I
Hmm.
consider myself pretty lucky. Even like I look at my parents, and there's a lot of things they didn't do right. You could say, but I look at there's a lot of things they did do right.
Mm.
And that's what I focus on. And I've had to learn. So I've naturally done that anyway as a habit, but it is something that I have had to focus on. Even this morning, I woke up and I was feeling that I don't know what it was. I felt there's something to do with money, and then I went, hang on a minute. Yesterday, I made a bucket load yesterday,
Right.
in 20 minutes.
Right.
Different story for another time. But and then I went, hang on a minute, you made a bucket load of money yesterday. What are you worried about finances for? You can make not only that, you have so many clients that, and so I just switched it immediately. So for me, but generally I will wake up and go, in the morning it is a habit where I go, what am I? And not only, I mean, I definitely do it in the morning when I wake up, the alarm, if the alarm goes off, when I do set the alarm, that's the thing. If I wake up, I lay in bed for a minute and go, okay, what am I grateful for? And it's just something that
Yep.
I do as a habit. I consistently do, but I also do it throughout the day. I look at things and go, that's pretty cool. I'm glad that that's in my life.
Yep.
So using that terminology, I'm glad that's in my life, is different from saying I'm grateful for, but the principle is the same.
Fine. Yeah.
So
No, fantastic.
something that I do it's just constant, like looking at things, and the people that I'm around. Sometimes I'll say that to them, so I really appreciate this.
Yeah.
Done this for me, or that you've done this. That's really impacted on my life, and I thank you for that. And just little things, even with my son, it's like, I really appreciate, I ask him to clean the bathroom, and you go, like, I appreciate that you've cleaned the bathroom. A lot.
Nice.
But, yeah, so it's
Nice.
so it's, for me, it's definitely very consistent every day, and that's why I don't have bad days, because there's so many good things I'm focused on.
Yeah, looking forward. Yeah, being in the moment, looking forward. I love it.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, it has been over 2 hours, so we probably should wind this up. Feels like a Saturday, but it's not a Saturday.
No, it's not a Saturday. It's not a Saturday.
Cool.
No, it's been fun, mate. I really, really have enjoyed it. It's set my day up perfectly.
Cool.
Yeah.
Same. I'm going to get on with it.
Yep.
Look forward to catching up again soon. You have a wonderful Christmas with your
too,
family,
Damien.
and then we'll catch up soon.
Yep. Wonderful. All right. Thanks.
Thank you for being part of the Share.Care community and helping people around the world prosper. You're creating a bigger pie for everyone to share. The more people contributing to the world being a better place, the better the world becomes, for others and for you.